Good. So we are still in the lesson about chapter 5, worthy is the Lamb. And chapter 5 is about Revelation 5, so that tracks where we are. And so we ended on question 9, which is on page 35, but we did not finish question 9. So I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to read chapter 5, verses 8 through 14 to bring us back up to context. So I'm going to start chapter 5, verse 8. It says, when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. They sing a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slaughtered, and by your blood you ransomed for God's saints from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests serving our God, and they will reign on earth. Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels surrounding the throne and the living creatures and the elders. They numbered myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands. They're uncountable, is the idea. Singing with full voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slaughtered to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. Then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them singing, to the one seated on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. And the 4 living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshiped. So the question on number 9 was, how does this scene invite us to participate in what is happening in the very throne room of God and the Lamb? And we talked about that a little bit, but I wanted to get to the note that's below it that kind of fills us in on what's happening. So N.T. Wright tells us, any first century Jew would know that by his blood meant through his death seen as a sacrifice. So we're talking about verse 12. Verse 9. You are worthy to take the scroll to open its seals, for you were slaughtered by your blood. You ransomed for God's saints from every tribe, language, and people and nation. That meant through his death seen as sacrifice. Similarly, they would know that a sacrifice through which God purchased a people and made them a kingdom of priests is the ultimate Passover sacrifice, the final fulfillment of what God had done close up in history when he set his people free from their slavery in Egypt, purchasing them like slaves from a slave market in order to establish them as a royal priesthood, as the people through whom he would accomplish his worldwide purposes. And it's Exodus chapter 19, 4-6. And he's just telling you that's what Exodus there is about. God leads the people of Israel out of Egypt, out of slavery, to make them a people through which God's purposes would then be known in the world. And that's just straight from Exodus. But John, so often, isn't just echoing one biblical passage. This first song also echoes the great passage in Daniel 7, where after the raging of the monsters and the vindication of the one like a son of man, God establishes his rule over the whole earth and then through the people of the holy ones of the Most High. Daniel 7, verses 22 and 27. The rescue effected in Daniel is, as it were, the great new Exodus, with the monsters who have oppressed God's people taking the part of Pharaoh in Egypt. John is picking up the same storyline, only now putting together the slaughtered Passover lamb and the vindicated Son of Man. That's interesting. Does that make any connections for you? Julia mentioned the Passover from Exodus before the other week. Now that probably was in the background, so we make that explicit because we're talking about the Lamb of God. When we hear about the Lamb, we would think of the Passover Lamb. So he's getting at, what does it mean? What is the reference for what does it mean to be a kingdom of priests serving our God, and they will reign on earth? So he's trying to put together verses from Exodus and Daniel to help us understand what does that mean for us today to be kingdom and priests serving our God. What does that mean?
Is it like in the line of like Melchizedek kind of thing? Like king and priest, ruler and priestly.
What is your priestly role? Like again, in chapter 1, the reference was verse 5, to him who loves us and freed us from our sins by his blood and made us to be a kingdom, priest serving his God and Father. There's that idea that Christians are made priests and we are to serve God.
Well, that's a familiar theme. I mean, you can find that throughout the Old Testament, in that the chosen people were a kingdom of priests. You can find it in Hebrews. Jesus is the priest among priests. So you know, it's familiar to us. Kingdom.
I have recalled to limitation of what it says here, and I don't know what I even know.
You don't remember what you meant when you wrote that.
It was a good thought at the time.
Yeah. Well, the idea is essentially, at least I would say, is that we stand in as the presence of Jesus in the world. Yeah, that's what you're getting at. That's what you're getting at. Well, I mean,
Sounds good.
right, Jesus has ascended and ruling, and we are to be his people. So we are like a stand-in for Jesus. We are his presence in that way in the world. That's what priests do. They mediate, that's a big word. They mediate the presence of God. They're a go-between between people and God. You're like the middleman. That's what a priest does. The function of a priest is. So if Jesus is in the throne room, ascended in heaven, and we are his people, we are the ones bringing the message of Jesus to everyone else. Like we are the stand-ins for Jesus in the world. So we act on behalf of Jesus.
Isn't that explained there on page 36 in that last paragraph where it says God establishes the rule of the whole earth in and through the people of the Holy One of the Most High?
I don't see it, but it sounds good.
Well, where it says God establishes, you know.
Yeah, oh, there it is. Yeah, right in the paragraph.
In other words, God is using his people.
Yeah. God is using his people. So it's like, well, what is your role? What is your role to play, sort of thing? Because the question was, how does this scene invite us to participate in what's happening as we look at this? So it's saying, well, this isn't just a scene of worship, but it's a call for us to do something as well, like not only to worship, but to take up our priestly role as well.
But isn't that part of what we do when we come to Christ? We are supposed to be responsible for living and sharing his word. We're supposed to be responsible for reaching out to others. And if and when we fail to do that, if we fail to represent Christ, then we're not truly doing our role as men and women who follow Jesus.
I don't feel qualified to. I try to live the life, and I taught my kids that, but I don't feel qualified to get out and go preach to other people.
You don't have to be qualified. When you ask Christ Jesus into your heart, you are a representative of Christ in the world.
When you're talking, say it, God will use. However you say it, if it's not exactly right, he'll fix it. He will use it.
It's like Moses too. He's like, but I can't speak well. Or, any other thing. It's like, well, I'm not good enough at this. It's like, oh, don't worry about it.
It's not, yeah, and it's not that you have to go stand on the street corner, this and thou and thy and all that kind of stuff. It's just in your everyday conversation you would have with a person.
Here's a fun
That's-
example that happened to me. I was innocently shopping at TJ Maxx up on 159 and ran into a member of our congregation. We're being recorded, so I don't feel comfortable saying her name, but y'all know her really well, and she makes really good cookies for us. And she was beside herself, nervous about going to the dentist. I mean, big time scared to death. And was waiting for her husband to be done at the bank with a meeting or something so that she could pick him up so he could go with her. She was in such fear that she was physically shaking about going to the dentist. And God put words in my mouth that fell out. I said, well, this is a great opportunity for you to trust God. She told me later that what I said to her impacted her so greatly, apparently, that she said she had the easiest time she's ever had at the dentist. And she told her husband right away, talked about it several times since. So just when you think you're saying something that just is kind of just something, it really, God can use it. God can use it. Yeah, it's awesome.
Very good.
Then I continued shopping.
Like that happened.
Innocently,
Innocently shopping.
very innocently.
Yes.
Yeah, like, just minding my own business, passing by. And I think like everything everyone said is true. And Frank's like, of course you should be. But what's interesting about Revelation is he's saying this into the context of people who are suffering and like afraid, right? They're afraid of consequences. We've talked about this a lot, but their culture and community they lived in. And instead of them saying, oh, don't be afraid, just hide, the message is still, oh no, you still represent Jesus, and you still need to be a witness for Jesus in the world, regardless of the evil that's going around you. And what struck me as I've been thinking a lot lately is, that makes it even more important. Like we are called in an evil world to still be witnesses. It's like people would be like, well, it's easy. I want it easy, so there's no consequences. So that, sort of thing. So when there's nothing bad happening to me, that's when I want to witness. But the whole message of the book is no, bad things are happening. Evil is about all around you. And that's why it's even more important that you're a witness for Jesus. Yeah. So that's keys us in a little bit about the language. So if you want, go back later, look up Exodus, look up Daniel. Once again, John is collecting Old Testament imagery and references and using them to help us understand our role. It's the same call, right? Called to be priests in a kingdom. Back then, the Israelites surrounded by all these other nations and all these other gods. The same call today. It's just every tribe, tongue, nation. So that's interesting. You should even hear that when he says a people from every tribe, tongue, and nation. It's like in contrast to, this one nation that was called out. Well, now God is calling out everybody. So everybody has a role to play. You could like, well, it wasn't me. I was the Medes or the Chaldeans, or I don't. Anyways, that was good. Thank you for sharing, Susan. Number 10, then, how many, so this is just a information question. How many creatures does John hear join in the third song of worship?
Every
I like this, on heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them. So maybe the better question isn't who is singing, but who is not singing. That's pretty cool. Everybody. And last week, I think we mentioned just, it's like Philippians 2, 5 through 11. You know, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. Okay, number 11. Why is it significant that in these songs, the Lamb shares the worship which belongs and uniquely and only belongs to the one Creator God? Oh, that's a good one.
He's God's son.
The Lamb is God
Mhm.
and worthy. Only He is. Mhm. Mhm.
So it's an attribution of deity is what's happening. So the slain and killed God. What? That doesn't seem to make sense. Okay, then number 12. In what ways might the expressions of worship found in these songs inform and inspire us as we too join in the worship of the Lamb? That is very open. That's a very open question. I have sang plenty of songs that are inspired by these words.
Messiah,
Messiah,
yeah,
yeah.
verse 12, right from the Messiah.
If you know Handel's Messiah, it's full of references from Revelation. So you may not have been aware as you listen to it, but you've heard this before in song. Up to popular contemporary songs, like there's songs like called Revelation Song or Holy, Holy, Holy is the Lord God Almighty. The Blessed Trinity.
Mhm.
Plenty of songs in the hymnal you can dig up. I've been trying to use them the past 6 weeks or whatever. Lots of songs from Revelation that have been inspirations for worship.
They encourage us to praise. I think those songs just lead us into it without really thinking about it.
Well, when you talk about all this stuff, it doesn't make as much of a dent in your thinking until you sing it. And when you sing, it kind of comes from your heart and you want to sing it louder.
It is interesting that in the heavenly scenes, they don't talk and just say these things, but they actively sing. I don't know. Just trying to think, how do you picture these things? How do you imagine them? You know,
I think you make a mistake if you try to imagine, because all this is in apocalyptic literature, and how would you see the Lamb who is slain with 7 crowns and 7 horns and
Steven Spielberg.
Perhaps he could envision it, but
The special effects.
I don't attempt to literally see that. I
Yeah.
think it means all powerful and it means all omnipotent. And
All eyes, all the lamb with eyes, all, you know,
right,
all
it's-
around.
Yeah, omniscient, and you just envision those traits or just conceive of those traits. Don't try to,
They're symbolic, not literal.
don't try to look at the lamb with all of those.
Well, but symbols are first for people with pictures, images, you know, even especially with smaller children, right? You're gonna introduce them to imagery first.
I mentioned a lot of, you know, it was popular to make woodcuts out of these. Or
Yes,
triptychs in the old, in Europe, and they would put these things out on these beautiful, famous woodcuts. But you try to produce some of those things, and it became very fantastic.
well, try to imagine though, not until very recently, well, even through most of the world, most people can't read. This is very more modern. We have worked really hard so that everyone can read. We kind of take that for advantage, I think. We just assume everyone can read. So I have to think about it in that way too. Not everyone can read. Not everyone can pick up the Bible and read. So what they used, even throughout like medieval times especially, so they would put these images in stained glass and pictures in churches and stuff like that. They would use imagery to communicate to people what they couldn't read. And so I'm just trying to think. Well, obviously, we know what the 7 horns mean. We know what the 7 crowns mean. We know what the 7 eyes mean. But does that really take hold? How does that take hold in you, like in your imagination?
But also at the same time, one of the things that people did was learn the stories. And the symbols, whether they're painted or drawn or carved. Like, for example, we use a creche. You know, that creche was a living representation of the story that they had been taught and knew. And if you didn't tell the story right, someone would correct you. Sandy and I have a story about how we met. And if I try to embellish it with other little things, she's going to be quick to correct me and have me get it right. And that's how oral tradition acted in our world, is that people learn their stories and learn them by rote. And the images, whether it was painted or carved or whatever, brought again to them into their minds that story. You know, the words of God present every day.
Just like my mom and dad. My dad wants to make a fantastic story about something. My mom's like, well, that's not how it happened. You know, he's like, let me tell the story. You know, it's just a story.
He's going to get him having to tell it right.
Yeah.
Some of us,
Let me tell the story.
Go to a family reunion sometimes and just sit there and listen to siblings talk. It's hilarious. Hilarious.
You find out a lot of things you didn't know.
It didn't happen that way. I didn't do that. You know, I mean, it's so
sounded
funny.
good.
So funny.
Maybe I overanalyze it, but we know when we sing, it's easier to memorize something too. Like it's a lot harder to just do pure recitation, just like memorization of verses. It's a lot easier when you set it to song. Could I remember all the fruits of the spirit off the top of my head very easily? No, but you stuck it to a song and I'm like, I got it. That's easy now. Or the Lord's Prayer, or you know, anything. Like you come up with a song for it, like much easier to grasp. So I think maybe there's that aspect too. But maybe we haven't talked about too much, but a lot of Revelation is about like redoing your imagination, how you think about things. It's trying to grasp hold of you and how you imagine things, how you imagine the world, how you imagine God. I mean, today most people would they imagine a world without God. You know, like, well, what is this whole immanence thing? Like God doesn't exist, so we're just in the world. God is not active. But this is very clear, like God is active and at work, and you have a role to play. So I don't know, it's just trying to bring out how counter it is, or what is their context where this would mean a lot, because their imagination would be like, well, Caesar's on the throne, and he rules the world, and all those different acts going on. We burn incense to him, and so to bring in more imagery that's very counter to that has to say and do something in their lives too. So I think it is powerful, and it's just maybe it's so foreign to us. We're like, what does it have to do with me? So we're just trying to discuss and think through, what does it have to do with us? Any other thoughts on Revelation 5? Who wants to join every creature? No. Well, I think willingly or not. Well, maybe that's the choice, whether you want to or not. Okay, so let's change over to the next section, number 6, lesson number 6. Okay, so I'll read. This was on page 38. Let's work on the introduction. So there's a decent introductory paragraph. It says, all doctors and all pastors know that when someone comes to them with a problem, the problem they talk about may not be the only problem they have. The pain that gets someone into the doctor's office may well be only a symptom of much deeper ills, medical or psychological. The fear, depression, or guilt that makes someone knock on the pastor's door is quite likely to be a second or third order anxiety which won't be solved until the first order ones have been exposed and addressed. This often lands the patient or the person seeking counseling in a position very like the reader of Revelation 6. We finally pluck up courage to go to the doctor. Now I'm going to feel well again, happy again. This visit will put me back on track. Wise doctors or pastors know they must disappoint for the moment in order to get to the root of the problem and effect the lasting cure. First, we must find out when you have felt like this before. What have you been most afraid of? Soon the person answering the questions will feel uncomfortable. I didn't know we were going to get into all of that. Surely we don't need to bring those things up again. It was a long time ago, and besides. Sorry, but we need to. Unless we lay out the problems to their full extent, no real healing can take place. Unless the ills of the world are brought out, shown up in their true colors, put on display and allowed to do their worst, they cannot be overthrown. Unless the 4 horsemen ride out and do what they have to do, the scroll cannot be read. The victory of the lion lamb will not be complete. So it says open. Have you or someone you know ever gone for help for a particular symptom or problem, only to discover that there was a more serious issue underlying it? Explain.
Liver transplant. Didn't start out this, it all happened.
We're getting new teeth. You didn't know you had an infection in there.
New teeth, still working on it. Now, we'll get rid of some more.
Oh, no. How did it start out with the liver thing? What was the first sign?
High blood pressure. Now I started turning yellow. It's all, I didn't think too much about it. It just happened and I thought, did it.
But you knew all the time you had God in your corner.
I guess, but he didn't get too upset about it all.
Well, kind of the point is symptoms point to a deeper problem, the disease. You can't just diagnose the disease. You're like, well, what's wrong? What are the symptoms? And then they put those together and they're like, what's causing those symptoms to manifest is, a deeper issue you have to try and figure out. That's how issues present, right?
Yeah, it was like when LC started with his Alzheimer's. I thought he was just getting old and forgetting things. So we went to the doctor to find out. And he was forgetting things. He forgot everything. But it took quite a few years. And with God in my corner, I helped him through it. But he didn't know me at the end, I don't think. The nurses said he probably did. You don't know. You just do it on God to keep you going.
I always remember what you told me, Sue, that he might not know who you were, but you always knew who he
Yeah.
was.
And I'm so thankful that after we quit milking, we missed that check and I went to work at the nursing home. I worked there for 3 years till my back gave out, so I knew how to take care of him. I didn't know he was going into the Alzheimer's. God did. He prepared me.
I like what you said. You said you allowed God to take care of them, or to take care of you. You allowed God to take care of you. So in other words, we surrender because we can't do it all. So we relinquish control over and trust God. That's good.
I felt so sorry for the people in the nursing home that didn't believe in God. And some of them were dying and they felt so alone. And when you have him in your corner, and you don't feel alone anymore. You got somebody to talk to, he may not give you the answers you want. You can talk to him and ask.
Well, I was shaken to the core when I found out that this good friend of mine who I had for years, this woman friend of mine, when she came right out and made it clear that she didn't believe in God, and it shook me so badly because we had had such a good relationship, good foundation, that I made an appointment with my minister to come in and talk about it. And I really had to just kind of talk about it. And what I realized later was that it was a great fear that I had, that she would not have the comfort that I had.
We want what's best for others, right?
And he helps with your kids when they're growing up. You want them to do this or that. They want to do this or that. They don't always meet what you want to do or want them to do, but he helps them grow up and they do things that you're very proud of. And you know it wasn't all of you that got them there.
I mean, it doesn't just have to be health things either, but it can be cultural issues or decline to, and this is what's going on right now in the news is we see a lot of violence. And so everyone's trying to figure out, this is a symptom of what, what is the disease or whatever that's manifesting, or, suicides and all sorts of things. Why, what is that the sign of? It's a symptom of what people, what is the core issue?
Core is they took God out of schools.
That's one thought. I don't think that's going to solve everything, just saying, well, they took God out of school.
Well, if they didn't have it in homes, well, at least they got a taste of it in school. Now they don't have a taste of it anywhere. Some homes don't anyway.
Some of us would say it goes back to the story of Cain and Abel and the idea of sin coming into the world, murder. And see, the heart is deceitful above all things, and the idea that human beings are at their essence sinful creatures. And the thing that we do most is sin. We take lives with not understanding or feeling that life is precious. We steal or take things because something belongs to someone else and we desire it. We we'll break every one of those 10 commandments that are supposed to lead us, and we think of them as the 10 suggestions rather than laws which can help guide our lives. You know, I have a good friend that says sinner sin, and I believe that completely.
Well, and we do as Christians, so people that don't know God, there's no standard, there's nothing to encourage them to do anything.
Well, the standard is I'm a good person because I like myself, or I want to be good, or whatever, you know.
Well, sin is so easy, it's hard not to.
So again, sins are, I mean, that's a big blanket word, symptoms pointing to something more wrong, something broken. This, you know, sins are a lot of time we talk about as actions, but then we can use the bigger word, sin. What's wrong with us? That, you know, our brokenness, our loss of relationship with God, our longings. We want what other people have, the Cain and Abel story. It's I'm jealous of you. I want the approval, you know, all these sorts of things. What is the lack we have in us that causes us to feel these ways? So. And that's what I think all this is Revelation is kind of pointing to is, you know, if we want to talk about why is there evil in the world sort of thing, it's because we miss the mark, right? We too often miss the mark, and God has come to restore us and heal us and make us whole again, right? So remember, the promise at the end of Revelation is, what does God have to do? He has to renew everything. Renew creation, renew the heavens, restore all things. So what is judgment? Okay, so let's read Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures call out as with a voice of thunder, "Come." I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow. A crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. When I opened the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature call out, "Come." And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people would slaughter one another, and he was given a great sword. When he opened the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand, and I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's pay, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay, but do not damage the olive oil and the wine." When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature call out, "Come." I looked, and there was a pale green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. They were given authority over a 4th of the earth to kill with sword, famine, and pestilence, and by the wild animals of the earth. Okay, so it says, what does John see the Lamb begin to do? It's just a fact question, the fact of the text.
Crack the seals on the book, on the scroll.
4 seals, right? 1, 2, 3, 4.
7 seals.
Well, so far,
We only got four down, 3 to go.
4 down, 3 to go, and then the 7th one tends to go a lot longer usually, the 7th. So number 2, when the Lamb opens the first 4 seals of the scroll, instead of 4 glorious remedies of the world's ills, we find the 4 living creatures summoning 4 horses and riders each, so it seems, to make matters worse. How are these horsemen described, and what does each seem to represent? So it's another fact question. How are they described? What do they seem to represent? A white horse,
Winning.
conquering and to conquer.
I think there's the answer. Conquering.
A bright or red horse, to take peace from the earth. People were slaughtered, and so they would call him the war horse, basically. The third one, a black horse, a pair of scales in his hand, famine. And the 4th horse, a green horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed with him. To kill. Well, it says sword, famine, pestilence. It's just death. It's just death. People die.
I didn't say green though. He said it was a green, pale green horse, his name sounded horse.
Oh, there was a black horse, yeah.
He said pale green. It says passion.
Sorry, yeah. Well, oh wait, no, the 4th one, there was a pale green horse. That's what I have. Pale green. It just says pale. Pale green. Oh, okay.
Green sounded worse.
He was sickly.
Yeah.
What is the 4th given authority to do? To kill, to kill.
Yeah.
Yeah, to kill. And so just tie it all together before we go. Number 4 says, things have to be exposed before they can be dealt with. Things have to come to light before the surgeon can perform the operation. Ancient memories of guilt and sorrow must be raked up, however painfully, before they can be prayed through and healed. Revelation is, as it were, a cosmic version of the tough pastoral struggle over the deeply wounded soul. The soul of the world is aware of immediate problems and pains, but unless we look deeper to the ancient patterns of conquest, violence, oppression, and death itself, we shall not begin to understand what needs to be done to be healed, really healed, rather than merely patched over for a few more years.
This is why your therapist will tell you you need to have at least a minimum of 6 sessions to even get to the issue.
Because you don't even know the real problem.
Right.
Makes me think of the Southern Baptist Convention this week. They had to rip the Band-Aid off this week, so to say.
Oh.
Stuff coming up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, again, you can't, so think on a cosmic, like over history scale of things that people are tired of. War repeats over and over again. People die of famine in the world, even today, when we have all these farming methods and foods, right? People die of simple maladies that we could so easily fix. I mean, people say, well, there's starving kids in the United States, right? In single parent households, you know, so.
1 out of every 5.
And what is that? And oftentimes we're hearing it now because everyone's concerned with fuel and stuff, is greed, right? Greed. Like when I watched a video about the guy who invented adding lead to gasoline, we were talking about this before, to prevent knocking. He knew it was deadly. He knew lead was poisonous, but he did it anyways. Why? Because he was greedy, because he wanted the money. You know, these things tend to happen over and over again.
Well, look what they're doing with the drugs that they're giving to people. They say, this is the drug you take for a heart attack, but The side effect is, your arms can fall off, you go blind,
Yeah.
so what do? You take, well, I'll take the heart attack, sit over the sunshine. But they're doing it, they're peddling stuff.
Yeah.
They can kill you.
Well, radiation or chemotherapy, the idea is kill the disease before it kills you.
Yeah.
Though you may die first, so it's the last resort thing because it might kill you. Too much, it'll poison you, right? So it's just giving you
Well, that's
enough.
what they're saying about acetaminophen now. You take things for a cold or a headache, but it's got acetaminophen and people are going to the emergency room because the acetaminophen in there is killing you. I mean, that's interesting.
Your liver can only take so much.
It's entitled, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying your liver can only take so much.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So,
Take it, I'm almost 90. Hadn't killed me yet.
Well, it helps the
Give it
headache,
time,
doesn't
Sue.
It helps the headache.
Yeah.
but I think what we're getting at is there are big issues and problems everywhere across time in our whole world, right? The deep issues that need to be dealt with, sort of thing. And God will bring those things, all things into judgment, right? Everything will be revealed. And so we're not done with the section yet, but that could be a painful process. Like we're talking about radiation treatment and everything to kill the disease, that can be a very painful process. Therapy can be a very painful process to save your life, sort of, so anyway, so maybe there's a lot to think about there. We can come back next week and get into it some more, but I think that's a good start. So, and let us pray, and we continually pray for God's will to be done, right? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.